Welcome back to Bakes on Things, the last word for your Thursday. This episode's going to be a lesson in reading between the lines. So I read an article on CTV. I watched their interview with the King of Sweden and what's going on with Mark Carney. We're going to take a look at all of that because let me tell you something right now. If you want to understand the difference between real international partnerships and the fantasy land that Mark Carney and the Canadian bought off media keep trying to sell you, all you need to do is look between the lines. All you need to do is actually look at the Sweden state visit happening this week here in Canada because finally somebody's visiting us. Because for once, we actually have a foreign head of state that has come to Canada. And not just any head of state, the King of Sweden, along with a delegation of 30 Swedish companies, government agencies, and organizations. A full royal state level convoy in Canada, physically, in the actual country. Let's go.
Welcome to Bakes on Things.
Welcome back to Bakes on Things, the last word for your Thursday. Hope you had a great day. This alone tells you more about Canada's real standing on the world stage, doesn't it? More than anything Mark Carney has said in the last 7 months. We have spent weeks, months, pointing out things like the empty arrivals terminal at Ottawa International Airport, no delegates ever visiting us. You remember the photo ops of Mark Carney flying everywhere around the world. He's leaving, but nobody flies here. We've said this a couple of times with Jasmine this week. We called it out last week. And now, look what happens the moment a real agreement is actually signed. They came here. They actually showed up. That's how diplomacy works in the real world, Mark. You build something meaningful, a real agreement, and then the other country sends its leadership to your soil to continue the work. But here's the twist. The king came, the 30 companies came, the Swedish leadership came, Carney had dinner with them, and then hightailed it out of here? The Prime Minister of Canada? The man who has spent half his term so far jetting around the world signing symbolic MOUs, photo op frameworks, and media fluffed agreements? We had dinner with the king and then he hightailed it out? Then he immediately flew to the UAE to sign another MOU? This is a real agreement. Shouldn't he stay here? Shouldn't he be excited? Now he's off signing another paper framework? Another symbolic nothing burger? Well, that's actually the tell, Canada. This is the big one. This is the mask slipping. Because when the agreement is actually real, when the partnership is anchored in years of genuine diplomacy, and when Canada actually did do the heavy lifting long before Carney took office, suddenly he's nowhere to be seen. That seems like narcissism to me. You didn't start this process so you could care less and you leave? What's the best part? The king basically said that in the interview. Not directly, but subtly. The interview with CTV that he just had. Politely, perhaps, but man, oh man, if you were paying attention to that interview very closely, the message landed like a brick through Mark Carney's kitchen window. When the Swedish deputy PM standing beside Screechy, Francois Philippe Champagne, says, "When we partner up, it's a deal you can believe in." Why would he say it that way? That's not just a compliment, that's a contrast. That is a diplomatic way of drawing a line between this partnership built on real work, real action, and real follow through, and the mountain of hollow MOUs Mark Carney continues to sign, that he's been signing like a tourist grabbing fridge magnets. He didn't say all the deals Canada signs are great. She didn't say, I should say. She didn't say this is one of many Carney successes, which is what the media was hoping she would say. She said the quiet part out loud. This one is real, unlike the rest. That's what she means by that when she says, this is a deal you can believe in. Then came the knockout punch, the part of the interview that CTV and every other member of Canadian propaganda machine desperately hoped would go the other way. They asked the king point blank whether this visit, the renewed partnership, has anything to do with, tell me now, you guessed it, Donald Trump. Donald Trump and Trump's tariffs, the U.S. trade war. It had to have been Trump, right? They wanted the fear narrative. You could practically hear the drool hitting the anchor desk in the interview. They were waiting for that one soundbite they could loop for 48 hours on each and every one of you. We are turning to Canada because Trump is unstable. But that's not at all what they got. Go watch the interview. Instead, the king looked at them and basically said, no, Trump has nothing to do with this. He said, you always have to be flexible. He said, Sweden has always been a free trade nation. He said, it's about exploring new opportunities, not running from Donald Trump. Ah, imagine that. So, by the way, this interview will be buried on page 7 tomorrow on CTV News, by the way. It'll get one day's play because they put the effort, but that's strike 2 for Carney and the CTV narrative. So get ready. It's going down to page 7. Strike 3 comes when he was asked what motivated the deeper partnership, what drove his strengthened relationship. And instead of saying Mark Carney was the one that drove the leadership and the strengthened relationship, or that it was Canada's new direction, or our aligned policies under this new Carney government, the king instead thanked Canada for supporting Sweden's entry into NATO in 2024. They were trying to pry out a Mark Carney is the reason I'm here. Here's the key. That was before Mark Carney. Before his government, before the global tour. This is hilarious. CTV was trying to drive so hard at giving Carney credit for this one, but this was before all the MOU fiasco. This was before all the photo ops. Canada was the first NATO country to ratify Sweden's entry in 2024 under a different government. Yes, it was Trudeau, but a different government with different ministers somewhat and in an entirely different global context at the time. The king credited that, not Mark Carney, not the budget, not the latest climate fund. He credited the real diplomatic work done long before Mark Carney stepped foot in the prime minister's office. So when you're a narcissist and it's not about you, you fly away. And that explains everything. That's why Carney isn't here celebrating this agreement. Why is he not having 19 pressers? This is a real agreement with action being taken. Well, that's why you're not seeing that. That's why you're not seeing presser after presser's victory lap. He always does. That's why you see him jetting off to the UAE to sign another pointless MOU instead of staying here to celebrate an actionable, tangible partnership where people are doing the work. Because he can't take credit for it. He didn't start it, he's not continuing it. And if he can't take credit for it, what does Mark Carney do? He stops caring. This is ego politics. This is narcissist politics. This is leadership built entirely on self-image, not national interest. Think about the optics here. This is what none of the mainstream media will tell you. A real partner finally arrives in Canada after years of mutual work, ready to actually meet our companies. A real agreement is moving forward. A real European ally shows up with 30 companies in tow, and the Prime Minister leaves, skips town to sign something symbolic somewhere else. You can almost see the internal calculation here. This Swedish deal isn't mine. I didn't start it. It predates me. I can't claim it as a Carney achievement. Better to go sign something useless that has my name on the press release. That's what Mark Carney's doing here. And the media, as much as they tried to twist it into Donald Trump's fault and twist it into a Mark Carney as the glorious king of Canada, they're doing triple overtime to spin this as some grand shift in economic power, a new era of Sweden-Canada trade. They're trying to turn 4.9 billion in bilateral trade into some mythical replacement for the US market. They're trying to sell the idea that Sweden could be the new F-35 supplier that replaces the Americans, and that's fine. That's all well and good. They're playing up every angle they can think of to make this look like a Mark Carney masterstroke. Look at the simple, undeniable facts here, guys. Sweden came here because Canada helped them get into NATO in 2024, well before Mark Carney. Sweden came here because of decades of existing industrial collaboration. Sweden came here because their companies want exposure to the Canadian market. Maybe that's the slight win that Mark can bank on. Sweden came here because this visit was planned months before Mark Carney even took office. And Carney wanted no part of it. other than the photo op dinner, of course. Carney wanted no part of it once he realized he couldn't stick a Carney was here flag into the Swedish mashed potatoes. This entire visit has blown up the myth, but that's not what the media will tell you. The myth that the world is lining up to do business with Mark Carney. This is not true. The myth that Canada is suddenly a global magnet for investment. This is not true. The myth that Carney's endless MOUs and announcements are turning us into some free trade superpower. This is not true. No, it's not. What this visit actually proves is that real agreements involve real visits, not just to one country, but to both. Real partners that show up on both ends. Real delegations that land in Canada and in their countries. Real deals don't need propaganda beats or media orchestration for Carney press tours. And real leaders show up even if they didn't start the agreement. Real diplomacy didn't start with Mark Carney, and it definitely won't end with him. The king came here, and that's great. 30 companies came here, and that's great. The Swedish delegation was here, and that is great. The businesses that came with them came here. And in one short visit, they unintentionally exposed the entire Carney narrative without even trying. They exposed his epic narcissism without even trying. Sometimes the truth just walks right through the front door, doesn't it? While the spin doctors are all looking the other way. Thanks for watching Bakes on Things, the last word for your Thursday. Don't forget to like, subscribe, have a conversation of this down below. Did you see the interview with the king? Did you catch these nuances that they were saying this is an agreement that you can actually count on? That's huge. When asked about Trump, did you see that? No, this had nothing to do with Trump. Nice try, CTV. When asked if this was due to Mark Carney, nope. It was due to getting involved in NATO in 2024. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Awesome stuff. Write about it in the comments. Let's have the conversation. And don't forget to join us tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. for the first sip for your Friday. We'll see you then. Have a great Thursday night.